Hello and welcome. You are watching the Daily News Simplified, and today, being 5th of June, we'll be discussing 7 important articles. But before moving forward, please make sure to hit the like, share, and subscribe button as it helps us keep going. Now, today is the day when the elections were declared yesterday. So naturally, the papers today they were filled with political news because India went through a long process of elections to its Lok Sabha, which was spread across more than 2 months and across 8 different phases. Now, this election was conducted across the length and breadth of the country, which resulted into results which was published yesterday. Now, naturally, because of this, most people they are keenly interested in country's political development. But should you, as an aspirant, be that much interested in political developments? The answer to that question is not. Because eventually the constitutional process required for formation of new Lok Sabha will be covered eventually in the newspapers and hence will be covered by us in our Daily News Simplified. But for today, let us go through this first article of the day, which you can see appeared in the Indian Express op-ed section. Now, this article by Mr. Nilesha highlights what is the new steps necessary which should be taken by the new government, and these steps must aim for increased investment and undertaking sustainable economic growth of India. Now, this article it is important from GS paper 3 perspective because as you can see the syllabus it highlights Indian economy and issues relating to mobilization of resources, growth, development as well as employment. Further, as you can see in the mains of the year 2017, a question appeared on several factors for India's potential growth rate and savings rate amongst are the probably the most important factor. Hence, we'll be discussing this article from mains perspective as the discussions in this article can be utilized by you in mains answer writing, especially by providing what are the challenges currently faced by Indian economy and what should be the ideal road ahead for few years to come. So in this regard, let us first understand what this article highlights about challenges which is currently faced by Indian economy. And first and probably the most important challenge in this regard is rising protectionism, especially in the Western economies, because recently especially from the time of President Trump, we have seen Western economies, primarily being the United States, has increased protectionism. That is, their earlier philosophy of promoting globalization has taken a somewhat lesser role, and these economies they are focusing more on increasing both tariff as well as non-tariff barriers. So you can understand whenever a Western country, which is a key export market for India, it increases tariff and non-tariff barriers, it might prove challenging as far as Indian exports to those countries are concerned. Hence, we can understand due to rising protectionism, Indian exports to these countries may eventually reduce in medium to long term. Further, a few years back, European Union it came up with a non-tariff barrier called CBAM, where the carbon content used to manufacture a particular product was taken into account in terms of applying tariffs to those products. Hence, it acted as a source of non-tariff barriers, which was primarily imposed on countries like developing countries like India, which has a more energy and carbon intensive source of manufacturing. So these are the examples of how rising protectionism can prove challenging for Indian exports in general, hence Indian economy in particular. Now let us take a look at second challenge, that are technological disruption. Now you must have realized that developments like artificial intelligence it is playing a key role in our day-to-day lives currently. However, it can prove challenging for Indian economy because this developments in artificial intelligence has long-term implication on job creation, as daily activities such as frequent jobs which require repetitive work they have been then given to artificial intelligence tools. Hence the job creation efforts in Indian economy can face challenge because of this development in AI, hence resulting into low amount of job creation. Now, further, India is also a key exporter of services to developed countries. For example, Indian companies, it exports business process and outsourcing jobs to other countries. Hence, this is a significant amount of service sector in India. Whereas on the other hand, whenever developments of artificial intelligence is taking place, this artificial intelligence, it has a potential to disrupt jobs, especially in the BPO sector. Hence, you can understand it will not just lead to low amount of job creation, but it will also reduce our service exports to more developed and Western economies. Hence, it can create challenge to our current account deficit because low amount of service export can then not cancel out this increased current account deficit that Indian economy persistently faces. Understood. Now let us consider the third challenge, that is receding fiscal stimulation. Now, if you remember correctly, during the time of COVID-19 pandemic, most of the nations they adopted what you can call an easy money policy. Because of shutdowns during COVID, most of the world economies they were facing recession. So to bring those countries out of recession, the central bank of many countries it adopted a cheaper money policy, that is an expansionary monetary policy, and hence it envisaged to spur the economy out of recession. However, because of this easy money policy, what we have seen that in particularly in developed countries like US and UK, we are witnessing increased amount of inflation these days. So, because of increased money supply, we witnessed increased inflation in Western democracies. So, these central banks they are now taking away these fiscal stimulus in a way that they are elevating or increasing their market interest rate. Hence, you can understand lower amount of interest rates leads to expansionary monetary policy, which in long term results into increased inflation. So, whenever you increase interest rate, it reduces the amount of liquidity in any economy, thereby controlling this increased inflation. However, because of elevated interest rate, especially in Western nations, what we have witnessed that there is amount of capital flight out of developing countries like India. That is the investment that were made previously into developing countries. It has been shifting out of developing countries and into developed countries because of this elevated interest rate. Hence, this can create certain challenges as far as valuation of Indian currency is concerned. So, the value of Indian currency, that is rupee, can depreciate because of this elevated interest rate, hence making our imports more and more expensive. Understood. So, these are the four challenges that, according to this article, India currently faces. However, this article also highlights what should be the way ahead for Indian economy to adjust to this challenging global economic circumstances. So let us discuss these suggestions one by one, and there are as much as 10 suggestions. Now I'll first start off with the need to make our manufacturing sector more and more competitive. Because as you can understand, manufacturing sector has a key role as far as Indian export to other countries are concerned. But for increasing demand of Indian exports to other countries, we need to make our manufacturing sector more and more competitive. Which means that first of all, manufacturing sector should produce good quality of products. However, these products should be available at a competitive pricing. So we need to ensure that manufacturing sector and their key inputs such as power and logistics, they should be available at lower cost to these manufacturing setups. And these are two challenging fields because I'll tell you why. First of all, the power that are available to industrial units, it is available at a somewhat expensive pricing as compared to the power available to residential and agricultural sector. Because the power available especially to agricultural sector, it is subsidized by the government, and in turn the cost is then transferred to commercial power. Hence the power available or the cost of power available to industrial units, it is somewhat expensive. And so is the case with logistics sector as well. because you know that Indian Railway, it provides somewhat cheaper transport to Indian public in general. However, the cost of providing this cheaper transport, it is cross subsidized through higher cost of freight charges. Hence, any industrial unit, it has to send some goods through railway. This will be done through increased cost. Hence, you can understand increased cost for power as well as logistic requirements for industrial sector. It creates challenging. It creates challenges in ensuring competitive manufacturing process in general. So this article highlights that the power and logistic costs for manufacturing sector should be reduced, and this should be done by raising resources through strategic disinvestment process, that is reducing the amount of government share in PSUs in general, and then these resources can be used to provide cheaper power and transport to industrial and manufacturing units. Understood? Now also job creation, it is very much important in Indian economy in general, because you understand Indian economy is a populous economy. Hence, to provide them with productive employment, it is necessary for India to scale up its manufacturing sector. And in this regard, few years back, the government came up with a production linked incentive scheme for as much as 16 sector. However, most of the number of jobs in Indian economy, it can be created in sectors such as garments as well as apparels. Because as you can understand, India is a key producer of cotton. Hence, it makes sense for India to become a apparel exporter. And this apparels and garment sector, it can also create large amount of employment as far as Indian economy is concerned. So this article highlights that government should make sure to increase the support to government and apparel industry in order to create more and more employment, especially for the lower income group of people. Whereas as far as providing quality jobs and high income jobs are concerned, in this regard, the government should focus on electronics, auto component sector, as these sector have a potential to provide high paying and high skilled jobs. So in terms of manufacturing, first of all, it should be cost competitive, and on the other hand, it should result into creation of more and more jobs. Understood? Now the third suggestion in this article, it pertains to higher amount of agricultural development. Because you know, agricultural sector in the economy, it produces or it is responsible for providing jobs to as much as 45% of our working class population. And to increase their incomes, it is necessary for us to make our agricultural sector more and more developed. Now, in this regard, the today's article, it highlights that, especially with consideration to dairy sector, by virtue of development of Amul cooperative, it has increased the incomes of milk producers, especially in the areas of Gujarat. Now, this model, that is cooperative farming or cooperative agriculture, can be adopted for other commodities as well. Further, as you can understand, India is a key importer of important crops such as oilseed, pulses, dry fruits, etc. So, this imports or import dependency has certain challenges for India as well, because first of all, India is dependent on other countries for ensuring its food security, in addition to significant amount of currency outflows out of India. So this article highlights that, especially with relation to cultivation of pulses and oilseeds, India should become less import dependent, that is by producing more and more pulses and oilseeds inside Indian territory itself. Further, these are remunerative crop. Hence, it will also result into increased income for farmers of our country. And this will create increased avenues for agricultural development. Whereas on the other hand, as far as food wastage is concerned, India also witnesses large amount of food wastages. Hence, to control these amount of food wastages, the article, it highlights that India should increase its investment in food processing industry, as it will not just reduce food wastage, but it will also create more money for farmers in general, because they will get more money for their produce, which will be procured by these very food processing industries. Now, also, Indian labor is in high demand across the world, be it Western countries like US or UK, or countries in Middle East such as Saudi and UAE. They witness high demand of labor, especially Indian skilled labor. So, in this regard, today's article highlights that India should ensure ease in its labor movement across the world, because these labor, they are responsible for sending large chunks of remittances into our country, which then prevents currency risk, and it also ensures reduced pressure on our current account deficit. Further, this remittance can play a key role as far as development in Indian economy is concerned, because India is the largest recipient of remittances as far as global economy is concerned. So, in addition to providing more and more remittances, ease in labor movement will also reduce or also encourage movement of social security benefits in other countries of Indian labor into Indian economy as well. So, in this regard, today's article highlights that India should focus on signing totalization agreement with other countries for getting social security benefits of Indian laborers into India. Now, also let us understand what are the suggestions related to service sector. Now, service sector is probably the most productive sector in Indian economy, because it is responsible for as much as 50% of total Indian GDP in net. And in this regard, sectors such as healthcare, tourism, they play a key role. However, in recent times, we have witnessed that more and more Indians, they are moving out of India, especially as far as their tourism activities are concerned or educational services are concerned. So this moving out Indians out of India for tourism and education, it results into significant outflow of foreign currency out of India. So in this regard, the article highlights that India should encourage providing better education facilities and developing domestic tourist circuits in order to attract these very tourists and students. Further, India is also acts as a key source for health tourism across the world because of its well developed healthcare sector, which is also somewhat cheap in comparison to Western countries. So, this healthcare or health tourism can prove as a soft power as far as attracting other medical tourists from other countries are concerned. So, these were these suggestions related to service sector. Now, also, Indian economy is witnessing increased economic growth as far as recent decades are concerned. And to further promote this economic growth, we need increased amount of investment in the economy, especially the investment which is gained from increasing domestic savings. Understood. So this domestic savings, when channeled into Indian economy, it leads to increased money multiplier, as this savings can be then utilized by banks to extend more and more credit to productive sectors and consumption requirements. Hence, spurring investments, especially channelizing domestic savings, it is very much essential to promote Indian economic growth. Further, investment goes in a jurisdiction when the government of that jurisdiction ensures proper application of rule of law. And in this regard, enforcing contracts, it is very much necessary for any business transaction to take place. So today's article, it highlights that India should play a key role in ensuring application of rule of law in country, especially in matters related to enforcement of contracts. Because this enforcement of contracts is probably the weakest link in Indian economic setup as far as right now, because these contracts cannot be enforced because of increased pendency in country's judicial infrastructure. Hence, in order to reduce this judicial pendency, the article highlights that government should focus especially on enhancing the judicial infrastructure in the country, which will then reduce the burden on judiciary, and it will enable the Indian judiciary to enforce contracts in a true spirit. Further, the government should also ensure ease of doing business in India, and this article highlights that there are currently two challenges with respect to ease of doing business. First are complex labor laws, which prohibits hiring and firing of employees in a country, and these labor laws have acted as kind of restrictions on business activities. Further, businesses in India, whenever they want to expand their businesses, they have to purchase some of the lands which deals with the matter of land acquisition in the country. Because this land acquisition is a tiring task as far as Indian economy is concerned, and it discourages expansion of businesses in general. So today's article, it highlights that government should ensure enforcement and early implementation of labor laws and codes, in addition to ensuring ease and quick process of land acquisition projects. Now let us understand what are the disruptive technologies. As I've already highlighted, disruptive technologies such as artificial intelligence and machine learning, they play a key role in economic development of any economy, and India is of no exception. However, in this regard, this year's vote on account, it provided for a separate fund for investment in these disruptive technologies, and today's article highlights that this fund should be implemented at its earliest possible time. Further, to provide jobs, you need educated and skilled workforce, and this can be ensured by increasing access to educational services, especially in remote areas, and this can be done through technologies such as mobile phones and internet. Further, as you've already understand, the levels of skill development in Indian workforce, it is currently quite low, and it is only about 15% of India's workforce is adequately skilled. And in terms of ensuring formally skilling of workforce, it is as much as 5% currently. So today's article highlights that increased collaboration between industry on one hand and academia on other will ensure improved skilling levels of Indian workforce in general, which will then enable this workforce to get better and high productive jobs. So this was all for today's discussion in the first article, which highlights what should be the steps that can be taken by new government in order to promote sustainable growth and increased investment in Indian economy. So let us move to the next set of articles. The first set, as you can see, appeared in the Hindu, the Indian Express, as well as the Business Line newspaper. Now, this article highlights that the insolvency proceedings against the company called Jayaprakash Associates Limited, which is abbreviated as JAL, it is undergoing in the National Companies Law Tribunal or the NCLT process. Now, this Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, it was introduced back in the year 2016 to deal with stressed assets in the country's banking sector. Because these stressed assets can play a key role in ensuring recession in any economy. So, for that virtue, the government, it wanted to get rid of this stressed asset at its earliest possible time and get maximum value out of these stressed assets. So for that, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code was enacted in the year 2016. Now, this particular topic deals with Indian economy and issues relating to mobilization of resources, especially to country's corporate sector. Further, similar questions, especially the question related to scheme for sustainable structuring of stressed asset, it was asked in the prelims of the year 2017. So you can understand this topic, it is important from prelims examination perspective. So in this regard, let us understand what is this insolvency process is all about. That is how this insolvency process can begin and how it reaches its culmination during the entire insolvency and bankruptcy code process. So for that, I've made this particular flow chart. So let us understand what is the process of IBC, that is Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code of the year 2016. Now, whenever a company which has taken some loan from financial institutions like bank, it becomes stressed due to any number of reasons. Now, whenever a company becomes stressed, the ability to return loans to its lenders, the ability reduces. So it poses a risk that country's financial sector can be plagued because of this increased stressed asset. So, in this regard, whenever a company is unable to return its loan to the lenders, such as banks, it can undertake an alternative route that is called as an insolvency and bankruptcy process. Now, the application for insolvency and bankruptcy can either be filed by a stressed company or by its other initiators, such as employees, as well as lenders, such as banks also. So, for example, a company becomes stressed. So, the application for bankruptcy for companies, especially, it can be filed in National Companies Law Tribunal or NCLT. Whereas on the other hand, individual insolvencies, they are dealt by Debt Recovery Tribunal or abbreviated as DRT. But for today's example, we'll be dealing with corporate insolvencies. Understood? So whenever the application for insolvency process, it is admitted into the National Companies Law Tribunal, it can be either rejected or accepted by the National Companies Law Tribunal. So what if the NCLT approves or accepts this insolvency application? Now, whenever this application is accepted by NCLT, the moratorium is imposed on other legal proceedings which is there on the company, which means the only one legal proceeding can be undertaken on this company, that is the proceedings under IBC. Now, the NCLT, it nominates a professional called insolvency professional, which supersedes the board of directors of the company, and he or she is responsible for ensuring overall functioning of this particular stressed company. Now, this insolvency professional, abbreviated as IP, it is responsible for bringing a corporate insolvency resolution plan, which means this insolvency professional will bring a plan. That plan will have what should be the ways or way forward for a company to become profitable again. And this is termed as a CIRP. And this CIRP is then presented to a committee of creditors, which includes all the financial creditors of the company. Now, this proposal, that is CIRP, it is then brought to the committee of creditors, and this committee can either accept the recommendation of CIRP or can reject the request. Now, whenever the committee of creditors, it accepts the plan that is brought forward by insolvency professional, it results into resolution of company's balance sheet. And if this committee of creditors rejects the CIRP plan, or it fails to approve this plan within a period of 330 days, then it leads to liquidation of company's assets like land and other important assets. But what is important to note, that the resolution or acceptance of the CIRP by the committee of creditors can only take place if more than 66% of creditors vote for its acceptance. Understood? So this is what the crux of the IBC process is all about, especially for the stressed corporate companies. Understood? So based on this information, let us now solve the practice question. Now, how many of the following statements about insolvency and bankruptcy code is or are correct? First statement, it applies both to individuals and corporate debtors, which again is a correct statement, as I have already highlighted, as corporate debtors can approach NCLT, whereas individual debtors, they can approach the Debt Recovery Tribunal under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Hence, first statement is correct. Now, the second statement, the resolution plan, it can be accepted by a vote of 50% of vote share of financial creditors. Now, again, this statement is incorrect, as I have highlighted. For accepting the resolution proposal, it is necessary for more than 66% of voting share by the committee of creditors, that is committee of financial creditors. So this should be 66%, hence the second statement is incorrect. Now the third statement, NCLT has the power to accept or reject the corporate insolvency resolution application which you can see from this flow chart, is a correct statement as it has the power either to reject or accept the proposal of insolvency. So as two statement 1, that is statement 1 and 3 are correct, hence option B is the right answer to this practice question. So let us move to the second prelims related article, which you can see appeared in the Business Line newspaper. Now this article highlights that RBI has absorbed surplus liquidity from banking sector through the use of variable reverse repo rate auctions. Now this tool to increase or reduce liquidity in economy, it is essential to ensure adequate amount of inflation in an economy, because it is the RBI which is responsible for maintaining inflation at a band of 2 to 6% of consumer price index. Further, this RBI's policy to increase or reduce liquidity, it is important from prelims perspective. Why? Because of this PYQ in the year 2020, you can see the question appeared on expansionist monetary policy by RBI. So let us discuss this. What is this variable reverse repo rate auctions? Now to understand variable reverse repo rate auction, let us first understand what are the tools of liquidity management. Now the first tool, it is termed as a repo rate, because you can understand banks, they have a mismatch or they can have a mismatch in their day-to-day balance sheets. So to reduce this mismatch, banks, they have a facility that they can borrow funds from the country's Reserve Bank of India or Banker of Indian Banking, that is the Reserve Bank of India. So whenever RBI provides short-term loans to banks, the rate at which these loans are provided, they are termed as repo rate. So this tool, it is reduced or it is used to provide liquidity to India's banking sector, because RBI is providing funds to banks. So you can understand this increases the amount of liquidity in Indian economy, especially with Indian banks. Now what is this reverse repo rate? So the word reverse, it ideally highlights reverse of this process, that whenever Indian banks, they deposit their funds with RBI, the RBI gives them certain amount of interest rate, which is known as a reverse repo rate. Understood? So these are the reverse repo rate and repo rate. Now reverse repo rate, as you can understand, is opposite of repo rate. So this reverse repo rate process, it reduces the amount of liquidity with Indian banking, because banks, they are parking their surplus liquidity or funds with the RBI at a return of some interest money. Understood? So this reduces the amount of liquidity. Now in this regard, let us understand what are variable rates. Understood? Now let us first deal with variable reverse repo rate. Now you can understand bank, it gives some amount of interest to RBI, it gives some amount of interest to banks, because RBI takes some amount of deposits which are known as deposits under reverse repo rate. Now whenever the prevailing market interest rates are greater, especially when compared to rates offered by RBI, then you can understand now banks will go and deposit their money in the market, because the market interest rates are greater. So in this regard, variable repo rate or reverse repo rate becomes important, because whenever the market interest rate, they are larger than the reverse repo rate offered by the banks, then it becomes more attractive for banks to deposit their funds in the market itself. So in a way, under variable reverse repo rate, the RBI says that I'll pay you greater interest rate than reverse repo rate if you deposit your money with me. So the banks, they park their money utilizing market interest rate, which is usually greater than the reverse repo rate offered by the RBI. So under variable reverse repo rate, RBI makes it more attractive to banks by offering increased reverse repo rates. So you can understand the variable reverse repo rate, which is generally offered by RBI, it is higher than the reverse repo rate. Understood. Now again, this is the same tool as that of reverse repo rate. So this is utilized to reducing the amount of liquidity with Indian banking. Understood. Now, very closely or closely related is the concept of variable repo rate. Now, if you remember, I made you understand that banks, they undertake some loan from RBI in order to deal with temporary cash balance mismatches. So banks, they provide certain interest rate to RBI. Now, whenever the market interest rates are lower than the repo rate, then you can understand now banks will take loans from market itself and not from RBI. So to make it attractive for banks to take loans from RBI says that I'll offer you lesser amount of interest rate under the term called variable repo rate, which will ensure that you take money from us. Understood. So under the variable repo rate condition, the interest which is given by banks from loans taken from RBI, it is lower than that of repo rate. Now this is same as that of repo rate. So you can understand this is used to increase liquidity with Indian banking in general. Understood. So based on this information, let us now solve the practice question. With reference to liquidity management, consider the following statements. Now variable reverse repo rate, it helps the RBI to squeeze liquidity from Indian economy, which you can understand from this particular discussion is a correct statement, because with variable reverse repo rate, bank park their excess funds with that to RBI. So this reduces the amount of liquidity in Indian banking. Hence, in general, it reduces also the liquidity in Indian economy. Understood. Now moving to second statement. Variable repo rate, it allows banks to borrow at a rate decided by the market, which is generally higher than the repo rate. Now, as you can understand, under variable repo rate, the bank, it reduces the amount of interest rate it charges on its loans to banks. So under the VRR, the amount of rate which is then offered to banks, it is somewhat less than the prevailing repo rates. So it should be generally lower and not higher. Hence, second statement is incorrect. So based on this discussion, the correct answer is option A, as only first statement was correct. Now let us move to the next article, which you can see appeared in the Indian Express, and it highlighted that the bond yield, it has increased by 9 basis points because of yesterday's election result. Now bond yield is an important indicator as far as attractiveness of Indian government bonds are concerned. Hence, they are important from GS paper 3, as government bonds, they are important source for mobilization of resources as far as government is concerned. Further, the bond yields, it has been a key area of interest for UPSC, as you can see from this PYQ of the year 2021. So in this regard, let us understand what is this concept called bond yield. Now, to understand bond yield, it is important for us to understand its relation with bond pricing. Now, for example, government issues a bond for rupees 100, and the government says that after 1 year, it will offer 5% of interest to the borrowers. So that means that whoever purchases this 100 rupee government bond, after a year, he or she will be able to get 105 rupees in return. So this 5% of interest rate which is offered by banks, it is called as a yield of that bond. Understood. Now, for example, there is an increased supply of government bonds in any market. So you can understand with increase in supply, it will reduce the demand of bonds as well, which will bring down the prices of the bond. To say, for example, it brings down the prices at 95 rupees. So this is the newer bond price. However, the same bond, it is offered at a rate called 5% of yield. It is offered at a 5% return. Hence, as the original price was rupees 100, the bond will get rupees 105 in return. So as you can understand, whenever people sell their bond at a lower price, it reduces the bond prices of a particular bond. However, the return which was promised by the bank earlier, it remains the same. Hence, the bearer of the bond will get 105 rupees after the end of 1 year. So you can understand, at a bond price of 95 rupees, the yield on this bond, it increases from 5% to 10.52% in general. So as you can understand, whenever the bond price is reduced, that is from 100 to 95, the yield on bonds, it increased, as the yield previously was 5% and it increased to 10.52%. So the correlation between bond pricing and bond yields are indirect. That is, as the bond prices reduces, the bond yield, they go up. Understood? So this is the basics of bond yield, which is very important as far as discussions are concerned. Now, as I made you understand that the bond pricing, it depends on demand of bond, and whenever the demand of bond decreases, it also reduces the market prices of bond, that is bond prices, it reduces. Now, as you've already understood, the relation between bond pricing and bond yield is indirect. That is, with reduction in bond prices, as you can see, the bond yield increases. Now, alternatively, this term is also called as yield hardening, which means the yield of bonds has increased. Now, there are many reasons for this increased yield. It can be that inflation in markets are increasing, or sale of government securities by central bank, it increases the supply of bond in the market, hence reducing the bond prices in general. Further, increased borrowing by the government, it also increases the supply of bonds in the market, thereby reducing the bond pricing. Hence, you can understand its effect on bond yield, that is in inverse relation. Now, opposite, whenever the bond demand is increasing, it leads to increasing in market prices of bond. Hence, you can understand the bond yield, it reduces, or it is alternatively termed as yield softening. Now, the opposite reasons are true as far as reduction of bond yield are concerned, that deflationary trends in the economy, purchase of government securities, or reduced borrowings, whichever results into increased bond pricing. Understood? So, based on this information, let us now understand what are the impact of yield or bond yield rising. Now, the cost of borrowing, especially by government, it increases due to increasing bond yield, because then government will have to offer more interest rate in order to attract more and more borrowings. Further, banks and mutual funds, they hold large amount of government securities. Hence, whenever the bond prices reduce, it also reduces the profits of bank and mutual funds in general. Further, increasing bond yield makes it more attractive to invest in bonds. Hence, it results into outflow of money from countries' equity markets. Understood? Now, based on this information, let us now quickly solve the practice question. Consider the following factors, and it is required us to answer the factors, that which factors will result into hardening or increasing in bond yields. Understood? So, reduction in domestic retail inflation will mean that the interest rate in the economy will reduce, which will then also reduce the demand of bonds, hence reducing the prices. Reduction in domestic retail inflation will mean the interest rates will reduce. Hence, in that regard, the demand of bonds will increase because of its fixed returns. So, as bond prices will also increase with increase in demand, which will then reduce the bond yields in general. Understood? Now, second condition or factor, that is increase in interest rates by US Federal Reserve. Now, whenever the US Federal Reserve increases its interest rate, it results into moving out of flow from Indian economy to US economy. So this will result into bondholders in India, they will sell their bonds quickly as they look to utilize those money to invest in US government securities. Understood? So this reduces the demand of Indian bonds, hence reducing the bond prices in general, which you can understand from inverse relation, will result into increasing bond yields. So second statement is correct and first statement was incorrect. Now the third statement, increased borrowings by the union government, which will mean increased supply of bonds in the economy, hence reducing the demand for Indian bonds. Now this reduced demand will also lead to reduction in bond prices, and hence you can correlate that it will increase the bond yields. Understood? That as already highlighted, that with decrease in bond price, it results into increased in bond yield. Understood? So the third statement here is also correct. So as two factors were correct, hence option B is the right answer to this practice question. Now we move to the fourth article of the day, which you can see appeared in the Business Line newspaper, and there are two articles. Both of these highlight that there are uncertainty in northern India's tea production, which means auction rate, especially in the southern part of country, has increased. Now this brings our attention to tea, which is a major crop in Indian economy, as it is in high demand both in domestic and in international markets. And India is also a key exporter of tea to other nations as well. So in this regard, let us understand what are the important growing conditions for tea in India. But before that, let us understand what are the major tea producing states in India, because the tea producing states have been a subject of UPSC question only last year, that was 2023. So these are the important tea growing states, and in addition, Andhra Pradesh is also an important tea growing state. So let us understand what are the factors which is required for proper production of tea in India. Now, as you can understand, there are certain conditions that should be met in order to grow more and more trees. So in that regard, let us understand what are the ideal temperature conditions for production of tea crop. Now, tea plants in general, they require moderate temperature. So the temperature range within which the tea grows at an optimum level, it is between 13 to 30 degrees centigrade. And you must also understand that prolonged frost conditions, they are harmful for tea crop, hence it should not occur. Further, tea, they also require high amount of rainfall. Hence, ideal amount of rainfall should be between 150 to 250 centimeters. However, this amount of rainfall should be evenly distributed so as to ensure appropriate humidity conditions across the year. So from that regard, this tea crop, it requires high amount of humidity. As this humidity or elevated moisture level, it is beneficial for tea crop as it promotes healthy growth of tea plants. Further, these tea, you can understand, are grown at higher altitude regions, especially in the Himalayan regions or in Nilgiri regions of the southern India. Now, as you can understand, it requires higher amount of altitude, that is between 600 to 2100 meters above sea level. As these high altitudes, they result into cooler temperatures and increased cloud cover, which is important for growth of tea plants. Further, the soil which is required for growth of tree, the soil should be acidic in nature, and it should be rich in organic matter. As this organic matter, it promotes growth of bacteria, which is beneficial for the tea crop. Further, this soil should be properly drained, as the waterlogging, it is harmful for tea plantation. Understood? So based on this information, let us now solve the practice question. Now, tea crops, they grow well in extreme temperature, which is incorrect, because you can understand the temperature required for tea crop is moderate temperature and not extreme temperatures. Further, rainfall required for tea plantation ranges from 150 to 250 centimeter, which I have already highlighted is a correct statement. The third statement, tea plants, they prefer well drained, basic soils rich in organic matter. Now this is incorrect because tea plants, they prefer well drained soil. However, these soil should be acidic and not basic in nature. Understood. So as only statement 2 is correct, hence option A is the right answer to this practice question. Now with this, we move to next article of the day, which you can see appeared in the last page of the Hindu, that is Science and Technology section. Now this article highlights that the bacteria, which is called Klebsiella pneumonia, it can use an enzyme, especially through a reverse transcriptase method, in order to protect it from bacteriophagy infections. Now this reverse transcriptase method, which results into change of RNA to DNA, it is important as far as molecular biology is concerned. Further, as you can see, GS paper 3 syllabus asks us, or especially the aspirants, to be aware of the field of biotechnology, because questions from biotech has been occurring in prelims from time to time. Case in point, this PYQ of the year 2019 on RNA interference. Now, in this process, let us understand what is this central dogma of molecular biology is all about. As this central dogma, it explains the genetic information flow from DNA to RNA and eventually into creation of protein cells. Now, this gene expression, it is used to convert DNA into proteins, and it is a two-step process. Now, the first step, it is called as a transcription process, which is used to convert DNA into RNA. Now, this transcription process, especially in eukaryotic organisms like humans, it takes place inside the nucleus of a human body. So, this conversion of DNA into RNA, it takes place into nucleus, and it results into formation of messenger RNA molecules. And upon this conversion from DNA into RNA, this mRNA then travels into cytoplasm of a living organism. Now in this cytoplasm, the second step process, which is called as a translation process, occurs. Now in this translation process, the mRNA, it converts into proteins. Now this occurs in the process called in cytoplasm, and it occurs through ribosomes. Understood? So this is a two-step process, that for DNA to convert into mRNA, you require transcription process, which occurs in a nucleus, and then this mRNA travels into cytoplasm, where through the interaction with ribosomes, the mRNA, it translates into protein. Understood? Now let us understand what is this reverse transcription is all about. Now, as you can understand, even by the term reverse transcription, it means whenever mRNA, it is synthesized into DNA molecule or into complementary DNA molecule, this process is called as a reverse transcription process. Now, this reverse transcription can either happen in nucleus of a cell or in a cytoplasm. However, it is occurring more frequently in the cytoplasm itself. Understood? So based on this information, let us now solve the practice question. Consider the following statements. In eukaryotic organisms, transcription and translation occur in the cytoplasm. Now this is incorrect. As I have highlighted, the process of transcription, it occurs in nucleus, whereas translation, it occurs in cytoplasm. Now the second statement, the process of translation, it is carried out by ribosomes, which you can see here is a correct statement. The third statement, reverse transcription, is the flow of information from DNA to RNA, which is incorrect, as the flow of information is reverse. That is, from RNA, it flows into DNA. So as only second statement is correct, hence option A is the right answer to this practice question. So with this, finally, let us move to the last article of the day, which also appeared in the Hindu newspaper. Now you must all be witnessing during the process of dusk, that is before sunrise, and in the process of twilight, that is after the sunset, for a considerable amount of time, we can witness this reddish color in the sky, which is due to sunlight. However, in this process, the sunlight or the sun is not directly visible. So how is this light coming from? it is occurring through a process of scattering. Now, this process is important as questions appearing on various atmospheric phenomena have been asked by UPSC before, such as this PYQ. So let us understand quickly what is this process of scattering of light which results into appearing of reddish color in the sky before sunrise and after sunset. Now, as you can see, whenever the sun is below the levels of horizon, that is before the process of before the occurrence of sunrise and after sunset. So until a certain amount of time, or whenever the angle between the horizon and sun's angle, it is about 18 degrees centigrade, this process occurs. So whenever the sun is between this area, the sunlight, it then interacts with Earth's atmosphere, and here the process happens that is called as a scattering of light. Now, this scattering of light is a process when the light rays, it interacts with the particles in the air or the atmosphere, and it results into changing in direction of light, which is called as a process of scattering, or particularly ray-like scattering. Now, this is process of scattering, it is more prominent in urban areas because there is also the atmosphere and also increased amount of pollution in these areas. So this process of ray-like scattering, it is much more prominent in urban areas of the country. Now, this mainly occurs whenever the sun is between the horizon and up till the 18 degree of inclination. Understood? Now, based on this information, let us now quickly solve the practice question. Consider the following statement. The sky appears reddish even after the sun has set, because we all know this happens. And the second statement, the reddish color of sky is caused by scattering of sunlight by particles in the air, which is a correct statement. Now, as I've already made you understand, this appearance of reddish color in the sky, it is due to the process called scattering of light. Hence, statement 2 correctly explains statement 1. Thereby, option A is the right answer to this practice question. So with this, we conclude our today's session of Daily News Simplified, and we'll see you again tomorrow at 6 p.m. So until then, please make sure to study and wish you a very good night.